Okay, so I think if you want to sum up Delicious in Dungeon, you can sum it up with this scene right here.
I knew it. That means it's grilling time!
That's just the first half, though. But then it turns into, well, something like this. I wouldn't so much say that this is bait and switch, but clearly the author knew that getting people to read the manga was really important, and then she could tell the story that she actually wanted to tell. So the series ran from 2014 to 2023, and it's just under 100 manga total. So it's 24 episodes in total, but as of filming, we're on episode 15. So spoilers up to episode 15. So the author here is Ryoko Kui, and in typical manga fashion, you can't find a picture of her at all. You can find this. So interestingly, Delicious in Dungeon is kind of like this mix between culinary, mostly Japanese culinary, but there's clearly the genre that belongs to the medieval fantasy setting, which is obviously Tolkien-esque. Fun fact here, it actually spawned a cookbook that's kind of like a fan cookbook, but cookbook nonetheless. Obviously, there's no monsters in real life. I mean, unless somebody finds the Loch Ness Monster, which I'm pretty sure is real. But outside of that, yeah, who knows? Bros are totally coming at me in the comment for saying Loch Ness is real here. Anyways, IMDb gives this thing a rating of 7.7. And, you know, if I had to give this thing a number, if I had to quantify, I gotta say that's probably about right. So to start my review, though, I do want to say that Delicious in Dungeon is just fun. And while it's a 7.7, it could be an 8 and sometimes it's a 9. It doesn't matter, like, it's a number. But, you know, there's better episodes than others, but it's definitely smartly written. And it's a smart anime. Like, the author has some serious ideas and ideas about the way her world works. And so I think that's really genuine. And it comes through, and I wouldn't be surprised if she was some kind of dungeon master or game master for her tabletop RPG sessions in Japan. So again, it starts out really lighthearted and it's centered around food, but it does quickly turn into this true fantasy anime with pretty much all the bells and whistles of what we would consider a tabletop RPG. The thing I do like, though, is when it does turn that corner around like episode 8 or 9, I feel like it still has that comic inspiration at every turn. So even though there's deep-seated meanings when it comes to some of the themes and some of the elements, and I'm going to talk about some of those, it still retains comic relief. And I think that that's something that, you know, some people think is disingenuous when you're laughing at things and other things and not showing your true emotions. But I think here it does help and it works. So I think that this is fine and I kind of like it. So the one thing I was super curious about is just, well, I wasn't curious about it, but death works in a different way here, right? So death is just not what it seems. It's not fully explained until episode 8, but the episode 8 reveal solves so much weird kind of urgency issues, especially dealing with Fallon, which is like who the protagonists are looking for. She's essentially eaten by a dragon, but it doesn't seem like they're really in a rush to go find her, which, you know, makes me kind of laugh because in the beginning, I was like, I don't know, the logic strings aren't working out really good here and kind of want to just shut this thing off. But my wife kept watching it, and so I kept watching it too. And by the time we get to episode 8, 9, 10, it did speed up, and I do like it. So if you've watched it, you know that in the dungeon, and specifically the dungeon, the souls of people are kind of combined together and tethered together, really is the better word, and doesn't hold true for monsters. This is like pretty interesting because two things. One, it's really Shinto-esque, and, you know, thinking about Japanese mythology and kind of yokai, all that stuff, it does look like amalgamation of, you know, Japanese culture and then also tabletop RPG fantasy, e.g. high fantasy Lord of the Rings. Dungeons and Dragons more so than anything, especially like if you think about the scenes where they find the bones of Fallon and they put them all together, do a dark magic ritual and bring her back to life. I thought it's kind of hilarious to actually see that in real life and look at it like the DM is like, hey, do you guys have enough bones? You don't have enough body pieces, parts. And the party's like, well, you know what? I'm going to cut it open. Would the enzymes or whatever like that have burned those up? And then, you know, the DM is like, well, I don't know, let me roll. Rolls high for them, and then they have enough bones, and then they put the bones together, and then they use their ancient dark magic to bring her back to life. But I mean, again, I think that's funny because I've never like thought about what that actually looks like when you resurrect somebody who's pretty much gone, like true resurrection, if you will. So in one of my previous videos, the Macross video, I was criticizing that the protagonists have gotten much younger, skewed age-wise in Japanese manga and anime, and that kind of detracts from kind of the stories that they can tell. But here that criticism is invalid because the little guy is 29 years old and the elf and the dwarf laugh at him. Well, clearly for us, and I know it's a joke to them, and I don't even know if this is a meta joke, it could be meta commentary on manga and anime at this point. He's 29, but he looks like he's 10. You know what I mean? Like, well, maybe not 10, 12, 14. I'll give him 14, oldest. But yeah, Laios is like, okay, should I call you sir? Clearly Laios is probably 22 or something like that. So criticism I had of old Japanese manga or anime was that a lot of times, all the people carte blanche have this very heroic nature about them, very honorific, very kind of procedural. And a lot of times that takes away distinctly from the heroes, like making those hard choices to be heroic, to be honorable. And you don't get to suffer through that kind of plot point or that growth. But here, it's not like that at all, because actually the kind of other parties are more self-preserving, if you will. And they have little what I would call agency, so ability to make decisions because of how bound they are by the ecosystem of rumors and reputation. And the thief character, he actually spells it out. He just says, hey, look, we cannot ruin this person's reputation because they'll never find another group. That feels reminiscent of, I don't know, if you've played an MMO, that kind of feels kind of that way, maybe? Anyways, what I'm trying to say is in this case, we see a clear distinction between, the honor among the party itself versus kind of the pickup group nature or the incentive-based parties that surround them and they run into. So I just want to hit on this really quickly because I think that it gets brushed off, but there's some commentary here for sure. Racism here is a matter of fact. So elves, dwarves, those with long lives, and other things, orcs, this, that, the other, they kind of are very matter of fact of like, we're different. And obviously this is very tokenesque. Obviously dwarves and elves have always had that kind of off-putting nature to each other. But I'm sure that the author was actually intending it, because what it feels like to me is a commentary on like the contemporary landscape. And what I mean by this, I could be completely off. I could be way off on this. But what I see is, and if you travel the world, and in some of these countries, when you speak to people about race and racism as just a topic of conversation, they're very matter of fact about it. And I'm not saying that it's not racist or racism, but it's just like, no, he's different from me, and that's why he's there, and this and that. If we look at it here, it's just like, hey, he's an elf, he's different. He's a dwarf, he's different. So I'm really not sure how to unpack this. I don't know if this is like revisionist history for the way that Japan treated Korea in World War II or what. I don't know. I mean, I'm really stretching it here. But I do feel like as many times as they mention it, that there is something here. And I could be completely way off, but it's subtle, but it's there nonetheless. So I just want to call out two kind of hilarious kind of gimmicks here. That is that, in typical high fantasy, there's adamantium, adamantite, whatever you want to call it, every variation of that, right? And then there's mithril. And those two materials are super rare, super strong. And here, Senshi, the dwarf, has them, but they're used as a cooking pan and the cutting knife. So go figure. But the thing is, I would expect no less from something called Delicious in Dungeon. Oh, by the way, props to the voice actress, Marcille. Her name is Emily Rudd, and she's perfect here. Like, the execution is flawless. The way she comes off is super likable, and even when she's not likable, she's likable. So obviously, my friend was telling me that she's blowing up on Twitter and everybody's like whatever over her, and it makes sense to me. Like, if I was young and I cared about those kind of things, I'd be like, yeah, okay, cool. So I guess the interesting thing about this show is they're eating monsters, right? And they're eating monsters to stay alive, but the people who eat monsters are considered kind of like lowlives, or I don't know, just not of a particular class. Something you wouldn't do. It's like beneath you. The interesting thing to me here is, when they talk about some of these things that they eat, especially specifically demi-humans, like, it's like demi-humans are off limits, but there is kind of some clear morality in trying to figure out what that line is. And you can see that, the thieves line versus Laios' line is completely different. And so I think obviously this is going to be a commentary on vegetarianism and veganism versus eating. Like, I, for one, picked up vegetarianism for 8 months. That's all I could do. I tried. I wanted to see. But all I'm saying is, like, I get it, you know, and I get the conversation and I understand where the conversation is going. And I think it's meaningful and it's impactful. And it's clearly a nod to just saying, like, hey, where do we draw the line here, you know? So I should get into the controversy of it all here because, you know, YouTube loves that kind of stuff and it's good for comments and engagement. But I'm not, because that's not who I am, and I don't care if I get views off of that. I'd rather not rile people up, because there's two camps here, and the two camps all deserve a seat at the table. There's clearly a problem and an issue, but hey, you know, it's not going to be solved in our generation, but we can try. Oh, the one thing that I thought was, based on the ecosystem setup and the way they spelled that out and how the dungeon was built and kind of thrives or is alive, I thought that the dungeon might be sentient and might be like a callback or an allegory for Mother Nature, but they actually spell it out in, like, I think episode like 14, where there's the Mad Mage and it's her dungeon and stuff. So unfortunately, that's not what this is, but I did see a lot of semblance to that kind of theory, but break my heart, it's not it. So I want to talk about skipping intros. I know that sounds weird. So the intro for me reminds me of an old anime called Oh My Goddess. If you don't know it, that's because you're not over 40, right? But Oh My Goddess gave me this kind of same vibes, at least the anime opening, right? And it just feels pretty clean, feels pretty calm. And, you know, kind of missed that. But I do realize that I think because I skip intros so much now, sometimes I don't, but because I do so much, I don't think the songs hit as hard. Because I know there's definitely songs in old anime that, like, really are ingrained into my psyche, and I'm not positive that I don't love those because I played them so much accidentally or had to mandatorily, or it's because I really truly like them. Okay, so I want to quickly talk about ancient magic and the morality of it all, right? Ancient magic, black magic, dark magic, whatever you want to call it here. Of course, Marcille has it now and she's using it, and the thing is, it's kind of weird the way they set it up and the way she explains it and the way she talks about it. Vice the dwarf is like this old kind of like ancient guy who's holding on to the old ways, right? And Marcille is like, no, I'm trying to research things. I'm trying to be contemporary. I'm trying to be innovative, you know? And to me, what she thinks of this ancient black magic is it's tech for her, you know? It's essentially science, right? Like, science is amoral, that type of thing. That's how she sees it. So there's no difference between science and magic for her, because it's really just the ends justify the means, the pragmatism of it all. Whereas, you know, I think the dwarf is looking at it like, hey, even if it's science, right? Like, are we going to collide two atoms here and then we're going to destroy the world, you know, because we make a black hole? And physicists, don't come at me here, but, like, you know, as far as I know, there's what, a point 0.00000 whatever 0.0000000 to the whatever chance of happening it, which means there's a chance. But scientists are like, don't worry, it's such a slim chance, it's worth colliding these atoms together all the time, right? I don't know. Again, physicists don't come out. Actually, you know what? Go ahead and correct me on that if I'm wrong. I haven't read a physics book in forever. But I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express. So anyways, there's that. Anyways, in the end, I think Delicious in Dungeon is a fun ride. It does have some serious moments, but it's enjoyable. And if you like the genre, you should definitely check it out. Thanks for watching. See you next time.